China. The downfall of a kingdom gave birth to the early signs of the Great Wall. The cry of a woman echoed throughout the world. A wise and beautiful princess brought peace to this land for over half a century. Discover China unravels the secrets of the beauty and the beacon. This is an ancient land. For thousands of years, people have worked this land from dusk till dawn. Farming has been the way of life for most people in China for 3,000 years. Ninth century BC, a new state, the Western Zhou Kingdom, was born on this farming land. The Western Zhou Kingdom was founded on the Yellow River Basin in the central plains of China. There were many minorities around the state, such as Di, Chang, Yi, and Rong. To effectively defend the state against enemies, the Western Zhou Kingdom began building mounds. For their appearance, these mounds were called beacon towers. The beacon towers were built from rammed earth. In plain view, they looked like regular mounds, but upon closer inspection, they were actually bonfires used as beacons. Though these towers resembled each other in appearance, they functioned differently. If enemy troops were approaching during the day, smoke signals would alarm the reinforcements. At night, lit bonfires were used. In letters from the Han Dynasty period, there are descriptions of the distribution of the beacon towers. It is recorded that each tower was about 40 to 50 li tall. Smoke towers were much thicker, only about 10 li tall. The smoke from a burning bonfire could travel more than 1,000 kilometers in 24 hours and send alarm signals to reinforcements in a very short time. The sun rose and set. Thousands of years passed, and there is still much farming in China. The beacon towers of Western Zhou are no longer around. Yet somehow, an old legend from the Western Zhou Kingdom has been passed down to generations of villagers. King Yo of Zhou was the last ruler of the Western Zhou. Once, such was the emperor's whim, he lit a beacon tower solely to appease one of his concubines. Reinforcements hurried to the capital, only to discover that there was no emergency. In 771 BC, the Western Zhou Kingdom met its demise. King Yo of Zhou was the laughingstock of later generations, but in his day, he advanced his country's defensive systems. He was the originator of what may be regarded as a prototype of the Great Wall. Upon the fall of Zhou, the spring and autumn and warring states period had begun. During this time, the country was torn apart into many rival states. divided their territories, building long and high walls. In northern China at this time, there were many nomadic tribes. They preferred to settle near grasslands. When the dry season came, the nomads, mounted on horses, invaded and plundered the Central Plain cities. The states on the Central Plain suffered greatly from these incursions. The northern China kingdoms began linking beacon towers using walls to ward off the incursions of the nomad tribes. These formed the basis of the present-day Great Wall. In 221 BC, Qin Shi Huang unifies China and establishes the first centralized feudal dynasty. He declares himself Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor, in the hopes that later emperors would follow his steps and continue his legacy. However, Qin Shi Huang knew that the people living on the grasslands of northern China posed a great threat. In 214 BC, he ordered the removal of the defensive walls of the vassal states. In addition, he sent troops to repair and link the existing walls of Yan, Zhao, and Qing kingdoms, which were used to fend off intruders. He also built new walls in different locations on the northern borders. After 7 years of labor, a wall stretching from Lintao and Longxi in the west to Liaodong in the east was completed. It was 5,000 kilometers long and became known as the Great Wall. Most of the walls during the Qin dynasty were constructed from rammed earth with bricks and rocks. This was a traditional Chinese building technique. This technique was later adopted by the Shang dynasty between the 16th and 11th centuries BC. Eventually, Qin Shi Huang completed the Great Wall, which stretches far across the mountains of China. Qin, like the kingdoms he defeated in the past, tried to surround his country with walls to keep invaders at bay. However, public resentment grew around the heavy taxes that were levied for the construction of the wall. This is the Shanhaiguan Pass. It was known as the first impenetrable pass. A temple was built on a hill 10 kilometers outside the city of Shanhaiguan. This temple is over 1,500 years old. In the temple, neither the famous Sakyamuni nor the Jade Emperor were honored. Instead, it was an ordinary woman, Meng Jiangnu. Red blessing ribbons were tied to an old tree in the Mengjiangnü temple. They expressed the people's respect for this woman. It was said that Mengjiangnü's husband was one of the forced labor workers on the Great Wall. Several years after he was dispatched there, having received no word, Mengjiangnü marched thousands of miles to look for her husband. Sadly, when she arrived, she was told her husband was dead. It was said that her stream of tears swept down the Great Wall like a flooded river. According to legend, it was said that much to Qin Shi Huang's surprise, that the Great Wall, built to defend the country, was unable to withstand Mengjiangnü's tears. In reality, with the great human losses in building the wall, the government became increasingly unpopular, and it all seemed to have been done in vain. Less than 7 years after Qin Shi Huang's death, peasants led by Chen Sheng and Wu Guang attacked the capital of Qin, Shenyang. The so-called Eternal Qin dynasty collapsed during the reign of only the second Qin emperor. The Great Wall was the Qin dynasty's legacy. Though damaged, it witnessed the rise of the Han dynasty. Today, visitors to the Badaling section of the Great Wall believe that it accurately resembles other parts of the Great Wall. However, the wall was built in various shapes and without any fixed pattern. Such was the Great Wall of the Han dynasty. It was different from those of Qin and the subsequent Ming dynasties. Not just a wall, it had a line of beacon towers. It was those beacon towers which distinguished it from other walls. At the beginning of the Han dynasty, the central plain was in chaos. The Xiongnu, a nomadic tribe from northern China, seized their chance and made their way 300 to 400 kilometers inside the Great Wall, threatening the fledgling dynasty. After 70 years of economic development, the power of the Han dynasty was gradually restored. Han Wudi, a great emperor of the Han dynasty, began to attack the Xiongnu. A large-scale construction of beacon towers and forts from Gansu to Lopnur, a town in Xinjiang province, had begun, fortifying the dynasty. This is the Great Wall of the Han Dynasty today. Lines of beacon towers along the walls of the former dynasties reached about 10,000 kilometers in length. Starting at Lop Nur to the west of the Yumenguan Pass, stretching eastward to the Yalu River, it is the longest stretch of the wall. As years went by, Han Wudi conquered and seized more land, becoming much stronger. The territory of the Han Dynasty expanded from the Central Plain to the Western region. With the protection of the Great Wall extended to Central and Western Asia, the trade routes along the Great Wall were to become the famous Silk Road. A steady supply of jade and spices along with religion and music were imported from the West by traveling merchants. At the same time, goods from the Central Plain such as silk, gunpowder, and compasses were taken via this road to destinations outside of China. The Great Wall played a crucial role in protecting the Silk Road and was also a bond of friendship between the Central Plains and the Western regions. The Great Wall near the Yumenguan Pass of Dunhuang had witnessed this period in history. In those years, the Yumenguan Pass was the only way of accessing the Silk Road. This stretch of the Great Wall, constructed around 100 BC, was part of the Han Great Wall. The Han Dynasty opened itself to the world by cutting through the Great Wall, a move supported by its strong national powers. A powerful Han Dynasty, it soon became an unquestionable center of world culture. After years of opposition to the Han Dynasty, the strong and aggressive Xiongnu finally admitted their defeat. Its chief dispatched a message to Han to propose a peace treaty between the Han Empire and his tribe, and expressed his hopes of becoming related to the Han Dynasty through marriage. In 36 BC, a beautiful young lady called Wang Zhaojun was given the task of securing peace between the two countries. A concubine to the Han Emperor, she traveled thousands of miles to marry the chief of the Xiongnu tribe, Hu Hanxia. Wang Zhaojun was loved deeply by the chief. He honored her by naming her Ning Hu Yanzhi, or Hu Pacifying Chief Consort, hoping she would bring peace and prosperity to the Xiongnu. She fulfilled her duty and made great efforts to maintain good relations between the sides. For over 60 years, there was never a quarrel between the Han and Xiongnu due to Wang's effort. The territory of the Xiongnu tribe boasted lush pastures and numerous flocks of cattle. it was a land of peace and prosperity. Wang Zhaojun couldn't have been a more successful diplomat. Many emperors had tried to defeat the Xiongnu, but all had failed. Wang Zhaojun alone had succeeded in bridging the gap between China and the fierce nomadic tribe. A woman brought more than a half a century's peace to the people of both sides of the Great Wall, simply through her beauty, kindness, and wisdom. It is said that this is the tomb of Wang Zhaojun, called Qingzhong. It expresses the people's love for her and records the charming story of her journey of thousands of miles to bring peace to the peoples of both sides. The Han Dynasty was a great power which opened China to the world. Without the strong spirit and resolve of the Han, the famous Silk Road would never have been opened. Although this strong dynasty had always considered the Great Wall as a barrier to separate it from the people of the Xiongnu, they have struck a peaceful coexistence. In the 7th century AD, the Tang Dynasty was founded by the Li family. Following the first emperor Taizong, Li Shimin assumed the throne. Known as Emperor Zhenguan, he laid the foundations for nearly 300 years of Tang reign. China, under the rule of the Tang Dynasty, was a civilized, powerful country that began to turn its attention to the outside world. The nation of China itself can be seen as the beacon towers, diplomatic beauties, or the Great Wall. Though insurmountable, it has no need for high walls and forts for its people to flourish and live in peace and harmony with its neighbors.